Members, it is about time we have the quorum. This special House Committee meeting will end by 4 p.m. and our regular meeting will get underway straight afterwards. So we invite the administration in, please. Just a reminder that if you wish to put questions, please press the button. And when you take the floor, please make it brief. There will be 5 minutes for each member for questions and answers. You might wish to leave more time for the administration to make a response. And as per previous special meetings, this meeting will have a verbatim record. We have papers made available. The first one is the paper provided by the administration on the collision of vessels near Lamma Island on October the 1st. There's CB2 8/12-13, regular 1. And also a paper from the Research Division of the Council Secretariat, fact sheet on a summary of press reports on the vessel collision incident near Lamma Island. There's paper number FS 02/12-13.
係。
將啲名列出嚟啊！
Will you post all the names on the computer? There is no names on the computer. I think it's on the way.
我歡迎政務司司長。
I'd like to welcome the CS for Administration and her team. On the 5th of October, the Director of Administration wrote to the Council regarding this special House Committee meeting to bring us up to date on the vessel collision near Lamma Island and aftermath. In the interest of public concern, we agreed with the administration's proposal. CS, please. Chairman, thank you. On the 1st of October 2012, near Lamma Island, there was an incident of boat collision causing a death toll of 39. There were a lot who got injured. The whole of Hong Kong felt really sad about the incident. On behalf of the Hong Kong SAR government, I'd like to extend our sympathy to the victims' families. I'd like to thank the chairman of the House Committee for allowing us to bring members up to date on the situation. We have colleagues taking part today. We had more colleagues taking part before. We have representatives from the Security Bureau, Transport and Housing Bureau, Food and Health Bureau, the Hong Kong Police, Marine Department, Fire Services, Home Affairs, Social Welfare, and DOJ. I will say a few words, and I don't think we need to have any opening statements from my colleagues. I would like to maximize the time available for us to answer questions that members may have. The Hong Kong SL government is highly concerned about the incident, and Chief Executive, together with the Secretary of Department and Directors of Bureaus, held a press conference to report on the casualties of the incident and various actions taken, as well as all the support services provided to the affected families. I'd like to say that the CE, of course, after the internal deliberation, made it very clear that the incident was serious and it was a matter of public concern. And we made it very clear that under Cap 86 and Commission of Inquiry Ordinance, a statutory commission of inquiry will be set up to look into the causes and also ways in which to prevent similar occurrences in future. There will be inquiries to be held. At the first Executive Council meeting after the incident, we secured the in-principle agreement of the Executive Council for this statutory commission of inquiry to be formed. We are identifying the candidates with high credibility to be part of this commission. Once we have identified the candidates, this will be swung into action. In terms of the terms of reference, all the details are set out in today's paper. I don't propose to repeat them. All in all, the Commission seeks to complete its work within 6 months after appointment. It will respond or address public concerns and also seeks to prevent similar occurrences in the future. The focus of our work is not only the investigation, but also to provide full range of support for the affected families. The SWD has deployed a lot of clinical psychologists and social workers to provide a wide range of support services. We made it very clear that this incident or this tragedy might affect the financial situation of some families. I have informed some members of the Community Care Fund and as to how the CCF can offer financial assistance to the affected families, and they will have some discussions going forward. Perhaps I pause here, Chairman. I anticipate questions from members. Dr. Kokaki, Chairman, I'd like to take this opportunity to extend my sympathy to the victims' families. And also through the CS, I'd like to extend my gratitude to all the officers taking part in the rescue operation. This has really saddened the whole of Hong Kong. But we are still bewildered about certain things. First of all, as we all understand, it was there was fireworks display. According to the paper, at 8:22 p.m., the emergency teams were summoned, and they arrived on the scene at 8:34. Now, with this massive disaster, why did the government still insist on going ahead with the fireworks display? Now, my question is, when was Mr. C.Y. Leung notified of the tragedy, and when did he decide to continue with the fireworks display? Second, what we feel worried and concerned about is that other than the senior government officials who appeared at the Queen Mary Hospital, there was some senior official from the liaison office. He expressed sympathy, but as far as the people of Hong Kong are concerned, there were so many doubts in our mind. The chief executive looked as if he was an information officer standing next to this official, showing respect, cap in hand. This is really against one country, two systems. Has the Hong Kong SAR government mulled over this point? Third, during the rescue operation, Mr. C.Y. Leung said that he would request that a salvage boat be sent from Guangdong. Now, we all know what the salvage boats are there for. Why is it that he made such weird remarks? Was it intended to please the liaison office officials? Also, I understand that the Commission inquiry would take some time to produce a report, probably 6 months. Does the Hong Kong SAR government have any immediate measures to make sure that those passengers on similar boats will be as safe as possible? Thank you. CS. Thank you very much for the questions. The last question I defer to either the Marine Department or the Transport and Housing Bureau. Dr. Kwok's other 3 questions. The fireworks display, the chief executive and myself were on the scene. I understand that after the fireworks display, he was notified of the incident, and immediately he decided to activate all the procedures. He was personally involved in the operation. Members should appreciate that it was a really shocking incident. Many people expressed their concerns. The liaison office, it is only right for the liaison office to express concern. Since the tragedy, many consulates in Hong Kong also expressed their concerns, and they told me to forward their sympathy to the family members. Now, through the electronic media, you saw what you watched on TV. I don't think I can comment on that. I think with such a serious tragedy, the official was really expressing his concern, and the state leaders also expressed their condolences and sympathy to the family members of the victims. The chief executive made it very clear that the request was intended to be a standby vessel. Now, with an incident of this scale, we only request a standby vessel. I mean, it wasn't really used eventually because our rescue team had the capability to handle the incident. I defer to the Transport and Housing Bureau to answer Dr. Kwok's question as to what immediate measures there will be before the Commission of Inquiry completes its work. Chairman, if I may add about the salvage boats. Now, when the vessel was unstable, it would impinge on the rescue work, so we were trying to identify salvage boats to stabilize the vessel. We found one in Hong Kong, so there was no need for us to use that one from Guangdong. As for the measures adopted by the Marine Department, there are a couple of points. First, immediate measures. We stepped up our inspection of local vessels, in particular the life-saving facilities and installations on board. Over the past couple of days, the Marine Department has undertaken a number of inspections. Perhaps I give you some information here. As of yesterday, there were 14 ferries inspected and 40 kaitos and boats, and 48 pleasure craft on hire. 18 verbal warnings were issued, and 1 prosecution was instigated, and that involved a sampan in relation to the storage of the life jackets. Now, for verbal warnings, normally they do not involve serious incidents. Maybe there is a slight shortage of life jackets and the location and so on. After verbal warnings, the Marine Department also issued warnings. Wrote to the ferry companies and impressed upon them to make improvements. Mr. Wong Kwok-heng and then Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Chairman, the incident occurred at about 11-ish. I turned up at Queen Mary Hospital together with the union. I helped the victims' families to look for their relatives. I saw people going or passing away. I mean, it was really, really sad. I'd like to extend my condolences to the deceased and also my sympathy to the injured. The civil servants, the rescue officers did the utmost to save lives. I mean, I have nothing but highest respect for their hard work. We spent the whole night at Queen Mary Hospital to help them look for their relatives. I mean, it was so sad a scene to behold. Now, if I may put a question to the administration, with regard to the 2 vessels involved in the collision, it was reported that they have a third-party insurance. to the tune of something like $5 million. Now, in this particular tragedy, we had a death toll of 39. I mean, it is pretty significant number. So, in terms of compensation, what is it going to be like? Has the government provided any professional and legal support for the affected families of the deceased or the injured, for them to seek insurance compensation? Has the government followed up on this particular point? Will the government also let us know, with regard to the two vessels involved in the collision, what is the insurance coverage like individually? I mean, this is something of concern to the members of the public as well.
CS4A or who among your team? Professor Zheng. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank Mr. Wong for his questions. Allow me to give some information here. Well, according to our legislation, all local vessels have to be covered by insurance policy. It is stipulated that if a vessel is allowed to carry more than 12 passengers, then the coverage must be up to $5 million. So both vessels are in line with such a requirement. As to the actual amount taken out, we haven't got the exact figure. It is said that it is in excess of that amount. We did ask the question, but we weren't given the figures. Mr. Chairman, I want to know, yes, the legislative requirement is $5 million. However, for this accident, we have a lot of casualties. I want to know whether it is likely that the amount is not adequate to cope with the compensation claimed. Just now, I asked a question, that is whether professional or legal advice have been offered to the families of the victims. Professor Zheng. Well, as to the assistance given to the victims and their families after the accident, other colleagues will supplement. As I have said, both vessels are adequately covered in terms of the statutory requirements. Yes, we're talking about a huge casualty, so the compensation needed will be great. In the past, when there were collisions between local vessels, the number was small, and on this occasion, we have something which is unprecedented. And the Marine Department, as part of the follow-up work, would also try to check if we need to adjust the amount stipulated in our law concerning the compensation. My questions haven't been answered. I want to know if the government have got any specific and concrete assistance to the families of the 39 deceased concerning compensation claims. Yes. Yes, allow me to answer this question. For the family members of the 39 deceased, we have been providing comprehensive assistance. I've said publicly that we're going to have something like a case management. Different families would require different kinds of help. We are going to provide assistance of all sorts. I hope members would understand that initially I think what they need would be burial assistance as well as psychological assistance. But I'm sure that I can assure you that for each and every deceased, their family members will be given help. Say, for example, a family may lose the breadwinner, and then children may face problems about schooling. Mr. Wong probably referred to what is being covered in the newspapers, and the Secretary also talked about the statutory requirements. I did carry out some inquiries. As far as I can recall, it has yet to be confirmed. I think they have taken out an insurance amount which is more than the statutory requirement. Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to take this opportunity to express my deepest mourning for the deceased. And once again, I would like to extend my heartiest condolence and sympathy to the victims and their families. On this occasion, as far as the disciplined services are concerned, I think they put up an excellent performance in their duties in the rescue operation. We should commend them for the good work. Just now, the CS talked about the setting up of a commission of inquiry. It is said that the government is going to identify somebody who can command respect and credibility to chair the commission. In the past, similar setups have been led by judges or retired judges. On this occasion, we are talking about a marine accident. The CS said that the Commission would be asked to look at the question of marine safety in Hong Kong. It is hoped that the Commission would come up with recommendations to improve marine safety. I hope that the CS can elaborate on this point. That is, for the composition of the Commission and how members are to be selected. We are lucky that we don't always have collisions and vessels sinking day in, day out in Hong Kong. And as a result, I want to know whether it is difficult to identify suitable persons locally. If we can't find one locally, will the administration be turning to the international marine experts for help? And then for the Marine Department, we have been told that the MD is going to carry out an investigation. The police has also arrested the captains of the two vessels as well as their crew members. In the coming months, we are looking at a number of investigations to be carried out by different committees and organizations. So CS4A, what about the duplication of work? What if witnesses give evidence to different committees and commissions in such a way that the work of the committees on inquiries be affected, and how you're going to coordinate the work? CS4A, thank you, Mr. Lam, for your question. For the Commission of Inquiry, we did make reference to previous experience. For this independent statutory commission to be set up under the law, we seldom resorted to this in the past. It was in 1996 when there was the Galley building fire claiming 40 lives. A judge was appointed to head the Commission of Inquiry. He alone sat on the commission. And as I have said, the SJ and myself are trying to identify a judge to become the Commission of Inquiry. Of course, under the law, the EXCO will be empowered to appoint more than one member to sit on the commission. First of all, we'd like to identify a suitable judge to chair the commission, and then we'll try to see if we need an additional member. In any event, under the Commission of Inquiry Ordinance, the Commission may also appoint experts, because locally we may not be able to get somebody who command high levels of authority and yet well versed in marine matters. So perhaps the Commission may appoint an expert so as to produce reports on points of interest to the Commission or assist in any other ways. So we do have different approaches to enable the Commission to carry out its work, in particular in relation to general marine safety for passenger vessels. Among the various points in the terms of reference, we can have the assistance of experts. As to the possible duplication of work, of course, first of all, there will be criminal investigation by the police. In a moment, Mr. Wong may want to comment on that. And the Marine Department, in relation to this marine incident, is going to carry out an investigation, and probably there will be a coroner's inquest. And as I have stated in the paper tabled before you, there will be sufficient safeguards to make sure that the various investigations can be duly carried out. Chair, just a simple question. This Commission of Inquiry, what can it achieve that cannot be achieved by other committees or commissions? CS4A. I think the DFJ's representative can elaborate on what can be achieved by the Commission under the relevant law. Mr. Chairman, for the Commission of Inquiry, extensive powers will be given to the Commission. The Commission can call witnesses. The Commission can ask for documents to be produced. And in fact, the law does give a lot of powers to the Commission. Moreover, in this case, you can see from the terms of reference that it is going to cover a wide scope. It won't just be about this particular accident. It is also going to be forward-looking. Say, for example, marine safety concerning passenger carrying vessels. And this Commission can have the assistance of experts and come up with recommendations and carry out a very focused investigation. In the past, there were serious accidents or incidents, and Commission of Inquiry has been appointed. A coroner's inquest would have a different focus. It is focused on the fatality. And then for the Marine Court, it is more about the marine aspect. So for the Commission of Inquiry, it can cover a wider scope. And the law does give powers to the Commission to target at not just this incident, but also a broader scope of issues. Claudia Mo and then Ronnie Tong. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, I would like to extend our sympathy to the victims and express our mourning for the deceased. And would like to extend our condolence and sympathy to their families as well. The CS4A said that the chief executive was only notified after the fireworks have been completed. In other words, 1 full hour after the tragedy happened. Who made that decision? Is it because the CEO wasn't aware of the accident during the fireworks, and so he couldn't have made a decision to stop the fireworks? And does that therefore justify the decisions? I want to know whether we can improve the mechanism for the future. Another question is about Mr. Li Gang from the liaison office. It is a fact that he appeared before the camera, and he looked like that he was the host and he was speaking to the press. Yes, he was expressing his sympathy. It is reasonable and sensible, as the CS has said. But what he could have done is simply to issue a statement, and for the CE to receive a request from the liaison office, I think he could just turn it down politely, so that during a tragedy we don't have this perception that a local tragedy has been sort of made use of and turning the guests into the host. So I want to know whether this can be improved for the future. And in the future, if we have something similar, can the CE promise that the people of Hong Kong will enjoy a high degree of autonomy, so that the citizens of Hong Kong won't have the impression that we are giving up our high degree of autonomy? CS4A. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Mo. For the first question, whenever something serious happens in Hong Kong, not to mention this very serious marine accident causing so many lives to be lost, we can always have room to improve. So a simple answer for Ms. Mo's question. For this case, principal officials were notified, etc. For the arrangements, I myself would personally examine the mechanism. As the C has said, on that day, the fireworks displays were organized by organizer, so it wasn't for us to call it off suddenly. On that day, I was also present, and it was also after the 20-minute plus fireworks were finished, then we became aware of the accident. And I hope that you will understand that we didn't have any well-scheduled activity to see you rush to the Queen Mary Hospital together with medical staff to see how we could further enhance the rescue and medical treatment. Somebody else was also concerned and he also arrived at the scene, and that's what happened. And I hope that you won't magnify it, exaggerate it, and try to say that who's the host and who's the guest. I think what is intended is to do something immediately. And there were also the press present, and we express our sympathy.
Mr. Ronnie Tong, Chairman, thank you. Like my colleagues, I'd like to extend my condolences to the deceased and sympathy to the victims' families. According to information, the guidelines applicable was the Marine Department's guidelines regarding marine traffic control during fireworks display issued on September 2012. Other than that, we're not terribly familiar with the marine safety within Hong Kong harbors. In overseas jurisdictions, normally when you go out at sea, there would be legislative provisions that require the crew members to inform the passengers of the safety exit and the way in which life jackets should be worn, like on an aircraft. Now, within Hong Kong waters, why is it that we cannot have similar requirements? We can issue some simple guidelines to the passengers and let them know about the safety exit, the life jackets, and so on. I don't think we need to wait until the Commission of Inquiry has completed its work and produced a report. Now, I mean, it's always risky to be at sea. I mean, it is dangerous also to be riding in vehicles. Now, the overseas practice, can this be adopted in Hong Kong also? I'm not sure whether this can be answered by the Marine Department. According to a newspaper report, the coxswain of Seasmouth informed the Marine Department. In defense, he said he notified the Marine Department that he had to leave the scene. My question for the Marine Department is this. Did the Marine Department ask the Seasmouth to stay behind and to be part of the rescue work? And if not, why not? Now, as soon as they become aware of the tragedy, did it coordinate the rescue work? And what sort of guidelines did they have? Can you elaborate in brief, please? Marine Department, please. Let me respond to the first question. I defer to Mr. Liu for the second question. Regarding safety guidelines at sea, like Mr. Tong said a moment ago, in relation to the fireworks display on October the 1st, the Marine Department, like in previous years, issued the guidelines to the vessels. Now, these are guidelines. They're not statutory provisions. The Marine Department will have a look at it again to see how the guidelines can be implemented effectively. Mr. Tong, well, I don't think we should be restricted to the fireworks display. And also, the guidelines should be legally binding. Secretary. Now, as to whether the passengers should be reminded to don the life jackets before the boat sets off, as in the same case in aircraft, should we do it administratively, or should we go down the legislative route? I mean, if it is the latter case, we have to consider it in greater detail. After this incident, we have to revisit all of this. Marine Department. Chairman. Do you remember my question? Chairman, In this incident, we have conducted a preliminary review. Of course, we are conducting investigation and will come up with recommendations soon. At the next fireworks display, we will step up inspection in terms of the life-saving facilities. We'll make sure that there will be no overloading. We'll make sure that they will be covered by valid insurance policies. We are considering whether measures can be undertaken by legislative means. But until this happens, we will adopt administrative measures to make sure that we can enhance our law enforcement. Now, my question is, the Sea Smooth notified the Marine Department. Can you respond in brief as to whether you asked the coxswain to keep the vessel there? Director, we received the notification about the collision. It was through the Sea Smooth that we became aware of the accident. After receiving the information, we sought further information, but the radio communication experienced some difficulties. We couldn't hear the coxswain well enough. By the time we heard from him again, he's already docked the vessel at the pier. Now, in an incident of collision and in which people were thrown into the water, if there are problems like this, the other vessel involved in the collision should stay and try to offer assistance and rescue the people. Of course, they have to make sure that they will do it as long as their passengers are safe. Ms. Emily Lau and then Mr. Tan Ka-pyo. Chairman, thank you. The Democratic Party extends its condolences to the deceased and sympathy to the families. We have to take all the measures to help the affected families. If they have any requests, I hope that the administration will respond to them as promptly as possible. We don't want to see them approaching councillors saying that the government is not helping them. Chairman, I have received some comments from the members of the public. I mean, this person is well up on these marine matters. He said that there are a number of problems. The number of crew is not sufficient, and the working hours of the crew members are exceedingly long, 24 plus 24 hours. Perhaps the Director of Marine can fill us in on more details. If they have manpower shortfall, there will be safety implications. He told me that the administration inspects these vessels on an annual basis. On the second, third days after the incident, the reporters show how difficult it is to get out the life jackets. Now, I think this is something that you should have inspected annually, and you should have found out about it. Director, that they have the coxswain and the crew members, and there are more than 100 people. Would it be enough to have just two crew members? They work 24 hours. I mean, they are no better than being a doctor. Is this a fact of life for this particular sector? Is it was it a ticking time bomb waiting to blow? Director, the annual inspection, are you just going through the motion? Director of Marine. Chairman, working hours for local crew members, and they're subject to the employment ordinance of Hong Kong, and the staff members should have a rest day within 7 days. The existing operation is less than satisfactory. They work one day and then they have a day off, and in between the time they have some time for rest. We will examine the situation and see how improvements can be made in this regard. The staff members did raise this before, and the companies did also put forward some proposals, although they could not reach any consensus. Manpower problem, Director. Yes, in terms of manpower, for each vessel under the law, they have 4 people, a local coxswain, an engineer, and also 2 crew members or sailors. So that is the existing establishment on these vessels. Ms. Lau, are you happy with this establishment? Do you think that it's safe enough? 1 coxswain, 1 engineer, but would it be good enough for such a large vessel? They work 24 hours and have another 24 hours off. And they do everything inside the cabin, and this is leaving a lot to be desired. I think that you are putting the lives of the passengers at risk. Why didn't you do something earlier? There are so many vessels plying our harbor. How can we make sure that they are safe? Director? Well, we do liaise with the ferry companies. We have also set up a committee recently to review the situation. We hope that we will be able to achieve a consensus to improve the working hours. Ms. Lau, well, I think that they're trying to make it cheap. I mean, it's not that expensive to hire 1 more hand. You're leaving them to their own devices. Now, in the Ma the housing estate, they have the vessels there, and the Secretary, you heard what we said, and this is wholly ridiculous. I mean, the whole inspection leaves so much to be desired, the whole operation leaves so much to be desired. Right, can you give us more information later on? Mr. Teng Ka-piu, and then Mr. Tam Yu-jong. Chairman, my thoughts are with the victims' families. I visited some affected families, and I felt really saddened by what happened. There were some union members who said that they didn't dare touch this particular trade because it is so tough, and they work 24 hours and then they have a day off. Now, we must bear in mind that the expertise of a coxswain would be more difficult to acquire than that for a vehicle driver. And they're getting paid such a pittance, and they're worried that if they convert or they change the working hours to 8 hours per shift, they will suffer a pay cut. Now, we have had 3 marine incidents involving ferries. I think that the Secretary for Housing, Transport and Housing should have a look at the situation to make sure that the workers would be given a reasonable kind of working hours and conditions. Now, for these sea smooth, what was the insurance coverage like? There were 3 marine incidents involving ferries. Did they get insured up to $5 billion? Now, if in this incident it involved 2 pleasure craft, I mean they would have a lower insurance coverage. And I mean, with a death toll of 39, I mean, they would end up getting very, very little. If we are talking about 2 vessels from small companies with very little insurance coverage, then the compensation would be exceedingly low. I am a district councillor of the islands, and the passengers are very concerned. Now we have the traffic accident compensation scheme There is no liability attached. I mean, they get paid $120,000. In October last year, October the 20th, there was a collision in Chengzhou, injuring 76. They didn't get any compensation. It was through civil proceedings that they managed to get tens of thousands of compensation. How on earth can you expect them to have the financial means? Why is it that the TAFA scheme cannot cover vessels? Will the administration tell us? Now, the ferries, I mean, how much is the insurance coverage for them? And will you also be reviewing the working hours of the crew members on board the ferries? Will the Social Welfare Department also review this TAFA scheme to make sure that the marine passengers can also be incorporated into the compensation package?
We have 2,100 vessels being registered for the waters of Hong Kong. It is said that in the harbor we had a dozen or so accidents, so it is on the low side. In fact, for a shipping register, you have to pay a levy. So I think the amount is not small, and I think you can set aside some money for this purpose. And for the $5 million coverage, we haven't been told that there would be an increase. And for TAFAs, it is not going to cover marine accidents. It means we have to turn to the community care fund. It is not a desirable arrangement. Moreover, every time when we have a fireworks display, about half a month ago, we will be issuing a notice having 4 requirements. What about the second day of the Chinese Lunar New Year in 2013? Probably there will be a fireworks display again. How can you be sure that the 4 points will be enforced? If you can have an assessment of the number of vessels out there, then probably you can give a better answer. Yes, I think Mr. Tang has used up all his time. Allow me to say this. I will defer to Mr. Liu to talk about the guidelines for the next fireworks display. For the other points made by Mr. Tang, I promise to follow them up. The accident happened. We want to prevent something similar happening again. And if something does happen again, we want our support mechanism to be better. Mr. Tang referred to the amount to be insured for marine accidents, and about the TAFAs, and about the passenger vessels, and the working hours of the crew. I promise to follow them up. Sorry. Well, in this way, we are going to end by 4 p.m. In this way, we need to be stricter about the 5-minute rule. Ask everybody to be concise. I could have stopped him because he used all the time except 15 seconds. Mr. Tam Yu Chung, on behalf of the DAB, I would like to express our sympathy to the victims and the families. And we also express our deepest mourning for the deceased in this Lamma Island incident. For those who took part in the rescue operation, for their bravery, for their performance, they should be given due recognition and commendation. It was an emergency. Yet all the departments were able to cooperate very well, and they acted swiftly. Just now, we talked about the yearly fireworks displays, and every time pressure boats and launches carry passengers to view the display. I know that there's a closed area in the harbor to bar vessels from going in, but usually we know that there are many vessels just outside the closed area, the restricted areas. There are quite a lot of them. Of course, usually they will try to take up a vantage point to view the display. Once the display is over, It is something quite spectacular. There is about 1,000 vessels on either side of the closed area and restricted area will leave their viewing positions. They leave at the same time. I think it's quite spectacular because they try to beat each other to disembark the passengers. And there were already comments saying that it's quite dangerous. It could have led to collisions when everybody is trying to berth to enable passengers to land. There may be a problem. So for the guidelines of the MD, in the light of this accident, maybe you need to review your guidelines to make sure that everybody will be safe. As a result of this marine accident, we have all become very concerned about safety on board ferries. It seems that you can easily gain access to the captain's cabin, and you can talk casually. But then for land transport, bus captains can focus on the driving and passengers can't talk to them. But in the case of vessels, it seems that we are being too relaxed, and so there is a concern as to whether this may increase the risk that's giving rise to accidents. So I want to know if the MD would like to publicize more and step up the proper education and have more inspection and monitoring. Marine Department. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the fireworks display, when it is finished and when vessels leave, it is indeed that it is quite tight, and then when it is overcrowded, then there may be a problem. Every time before there is a fireworks display, together with the Marine Police and our own colleagues, we will make arrangements to make sure that the vessels will call at different piers, and at each and every landing point we do deploy officers to carry out patrolling. We use radar guns to check the speed of the boats, and we try to control the crowd. What we want to do is to make sure that there will be one-way flow concerning the passengers who leave the pier, and we'll try to make sure that the vessels will queue up to disembark their passengers. Every time before there is a fireworks display, we talk to the operators and we have a briefing session for the operators. We do remind them of the guidelines. And next time before the fireworks display, we will do more, and in terms of deployment of vessels, we'll enhance our work. Perhaps we should try to have more piers being made available for the use by passengers. Mr. Kwok. Just now, members talked about compensation, litigation, and claims. I'm sure the victims and their families have to face this problem soon. According to CAP 434, there is this piece of legislation about the liabilities of the owners of merchant shipping. Probably they're going to cite Article 2 and 7 of the relevant convention to limit the size of the compensation. If they try to invoke the powers under this 1967 convention, the amount of compensation will be small in size, and then the victims and their families may not get any reasonable amounts of compensation. I want to know if the government and or the Federation of Insurers will make inquiries as to whether they are going to invoke the powers under the convention so as to limit the size of the compensation. Who would like to answer this question? Yes, allow me to give an answer. In a moment, the director will answer the question. For the international marine organizations' statement about merchant shipping is about ocean-going vessels. For Hong Kong, we have merchant shipping local vessels ordinance to stipulate the amount to be insured, among other things. So we're talking about another piece of legislation. MD, the director, please. As the STH has said, that convention will not apply to local vessels. For local vessels, the claim for compensation will be under our local legislation. And for vessels carrying more than 12 passengers, the amount to be covered will be $5 million. Yes, mention has been made as to whether $5 million is too small a sum. This is exactly what we're going to review as part of our work. We'll try to see whether we need to increase the amount to be insured. Thank you. A follow-up, please, Mr. Chairman. You talked about the marine laws, but in Hong Kong, when we talk about personal injuries, you have a 3-year time limit. But when there is a marine accident, when there are personal injuries and fatalities at sea, the time limit is 2 years only. Why is there this discrepancy? And I want to know whether we need to review the marine laws. And what about the DFJ and the Marine Department? Would you take this opportunity to re-examine our marine laws and to see whether the IMO's convention is applicable to the local vessels? STH, as the director said, we are going to take a comprehensive view of the laws governing local vessels and ocean-going vessels to see whether there's room for improvement. We do not rule out proposals to amend the law after consulting the stakeholders. Mr. Chen Kam-lam. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For this accident at sea, for this tragedy at sea, we are all saddened. The CE and all relevant government departments and bureaus acted swiftly. They reacted very speedily to help the victims. They should be commended by us. And for the frontline officers who were involved in the rescue operation, they operated late at night in darkness, and they made their best endeavors, and they should be commended by us. This is a major, it is a very serious accident. So for assistance to be offered at the international level, it is natural. And for the central government to indicate that it could be of help, I think, of course, we welcomed it. I was surprised to see that some people were offended. For the liaison office to express their concern and sympathy, this attracted criticism. I found this odd. I found this strange. I hope this won't be the attitude to be adopted to view the support and concern shown by the central government towards the affairs of Hong Kong. What I want to say is that the Director of Marine talked about the figure of $5 million for insurance. The vessel operators had taken out insurance policies of more than $5 million. I want to know about the amount taken out and whether it was in exceedance of the statutory requirements. Are you aware of it? Do you know the figures? Of course, we don't want to have another major accident at sea. But if you know the figures, then it will be useful. And then to amend the figures in the law concerning compensation and insurance. I want to know whether it is right to say that the director may, in the light of realities, come up with another figure. And for different types of vessels, the director may stipulate a different amount for the insurance. If this is indeed the case, please don't wait for recommendations to come from the Commission of Inquiry. And I hope the administration can talk to the industry as soon as possible so as to come up with a higher level of insurance.
Also, in terms of port control, under the existing orders, of course, we don't find any problems with legislation without any disasters at sea. Now, the merchant shipping ordinance was enacted in the early 1990s, and I think it is time we reviewed the provisions. There may be some penalties and fines that on the low side, and that would encourage a cavalier attitude, perhaps. Director or Secretary, let me respond to the last point of Mr. Chan's regarding merchant shipping, governing local and overseas vessels. Are the provisions falling behind? We are prepared to look at them. As for the insurance coverage, indeed, in terms of insurance, there is a requirement under the law when the Marine Department issues the licenses and the permits. They have to make sure that the regulations are complied with. There is a mention of $5 million in terms of insurance coverage that applies to vessels with a carrying capacity of 12 or below. Is this considered enough in the light of the incident? We're prepared to look at it. We don't rule out the possibility that this will be raised. Mr. Chen Kam-lam, Chairman. We visited some of the ferries. The life-saving facilities on the ferries are not easily accessible. Now, if you look at the Star Ferry, the life jackets stored well away from the seats. Perhaps this can be reviewed as a whole. Mr. Albert Ho and Mr. Leung, Chairman. Our hearts go out to the deceased and the families affected. We'd like to extend our deepest sympathy. What the government has to do in this instance is to rescue and then to offer assistance to the affected families. And then what they have to do is to identify measures that should immediately be put in place to prevent similar occurrences. They should not wait until the Commission of Inquiry has completed its work. We simply cannot wait for this. I'm sure that the CS would agree with me. There must be some internal meetings to help you get to grips with all the necessary information and to highlight all the key factors. You have to highlight all these factors, like whether there are any problems with the navigation channel, the speed, the qualification of the coxswains for these vessels in local waters. Would there be any particular requirements, any ceiling imposed on the carrying load, and so on? All these have to be considered, and then come up with measures to prevent similar accidents from happening again. We can minimize the risks, or we can eliminate the risks altogether. But having heard from Secretary Zheng, I find it a little bit surprised that you talked about the number of life jackets, that you failed to tell us what the most important administrative measures are that can minimize the risk. The government doesn't have any explanation like the suspected causes and so on. I think that the family members would also like you to come up with something. Of course, you have to review these through a statutory process, because otherwise, on what basis are you making the arrests? On what basis are you detaining the people? I think the Secretary should come up with something concrete instead of just counting the number of life jackets. What important measures should be undertaken? What are the possible causes that you have in mind? And what are you going to do to eliminate the risks? Second, the liaison office, Mr. Li Gang and the chief executive visited the injured. You make it sound as if this is a normal enough issue. Now, the thing is, does the Hong Kong SAR government observe the protocol? That was an official visit, and the chief executive was discharging his official function. Normally, he should not be accompanied by anybody who is not part of the government. I mean, the officials will not be going there together with the councillors. It gives people the impression that the government is not observing any protocol. It seems that the chief executive is just a lowly official behind the liaison office official. I think you have to respect the feelings and sentiments of the people of Hong Kong and observe all the protocols scrupulously. Secretary, Chairman, Mr. Ho said that what we should do after the incident is to prevent similar occurrences from happening. That much we agree, and this is exactly what we're doing. The Marine Department has activated internal investigation, like the causes of the incident. Were there any structural problems? Were there any problems with the navigation channel and so on? That the internal investigation hasn't quite completed, and there is a commission of inquiry that is looking into the matter, so we have to be careful in this regard in terms of dissemination of information. Now, whether the vessel was overloaded, I don't think there was any problem with that. Where the incident occurred, it wasn't busy with shipping, and it wasn't within the speed control zone. I mean, it's not appropriate for us to disclose further details. As for long-term measures, we will not wait until the Commission of Inquiry has completed its work. We are conducting reviews at the moment. Now, in terms of the insurance coverage and the safety measures on board, we don't have to wait until the Commission has completed its work. Mr. Leung. Chairman, I was really shocked by what happened. I extend my condolences to the 39 who lost their lives, and I also extend my sympathy to the affected families. This incident has not just aroused the concerns of the people of Hong Kong. The residents near the place of accident also expressed concerns, in particular those who use ferries on a regular basis. Now, the next day, on the third day after the incident, the District Council convened a special meeting. Surprisingly, there were only district councillors who expressed their views without the presence of officials. It shows that the notification system leaves are not to be desired, and people simply don't get any comfort and concerns are shown to them. The District Council expressed their concerns, and I hope that the HAD, the Marine Department or the police should attend all these special meetings. I think as far as the Lamma residents are concerned, they are also severely affected. The Lamma residents are very concerned about the whole thing, and they also expressed their condolences to the deceased. Perhaps the administration might wish to identify a location to set up a memorial in mourning of the 39 deceased, and also to act as a reminder of the safety awareness at sea. Perhaps the CS might wish to address this point. CS? Thank you very much, Mr. Leung, for saying that the Islands and District Council held a meeting to discuss the issue. In fact, we remind colleagues to tie in with the district councils if there are issues of concerns to them that are being discussed. They should attend. I'm not sure whether there was any communication gap, and as a result, no departments were represented at that meeting. Perhaps I find out about it later on. I heard what Mr. Leung had to say. Perhaps we should seriously consider this. If the rural committees have any views, we're all ears. Mr. Alan Leung, on behalf of the Civic Party, I would like to extend our condolences to the victims, and also our deepest sympathy to the affected families. For those disciplined officers who risked their lives to rescue the victims, I have the highest respect for them. I'm not sure whether the CS was aware that a couple of days after the incident, there were some newspaper reports that there was a report going back 15 years ago that touched on the safety, marine safety of the area near the where the accident occurred. There was a warning that was sounded. Now, basically, because of the surge in the number of vessels in the harbor, because of the high speed, because of the water current, and so on, there was a warning that was sounded in that particular report. Now, 15 years on, some departments might have been negligent and not picked up on the warning sounded by the report. And there were some reports in the media that on the night of the collision, in fact, near Lamma Island, the shipping was particularly chaotic. There were more vessels, and during or before the collision, the two vessels were reported to be deviating from the normal routes, and there were so many vessels coming into Hong Kong, and there was a free-for-all, and there was no control and regulation. These are all the reports. I'm not asking you to answer all the questions, but in the appendix of the paper you submitted, you talked about the terms of reference of the Commission of Inquiry. Now, in A, B, and C, which one would empower the Commission to address the questions that I put? Earlier, there were some councillors who raised similar questions. Now, in B, it would just look at the consider and evaluate the general conditions of the marine safety concerning passenger vessels in Hong Kong and the adequacy or otherwise of the present system of control. Now, I hope that the Secretary, the CSR, will address this particular point.
The police is now carrying out a criminal investigation. Can I be given confirmation that the police work will not be inhibited by the Commission of Inquiry? Or to phrase it in another way, will the police be helping the Commission with the taking of evidence? Yes, I'll answer the one of the questions, and then Mr. Lai will talk about the police investigation. When we drew up the terms of reference for the inquiry commission, myself and the DOJ would like to give the widest scope to the commission so that the commission may look into the circumstances leading to the collision, and we would also like to look forward. So we are going to carry out a study, and we want to find answers to certain questions like those asked by Mr. Leung, and we hope that they can be accommodated in the terms of reference. Ascertain the causes of the incident. I think it covers a lot. Safety of the navigation channels, speed of the navigation, as well as all sorts of things on board the vessels. We know that if we simply talk about ascertaining the causes of the incident and preventing the recurrence of similar incidents, then people would be worried that it is obvious that this is an accident at sea, and then a lot of issues about marine safety will be raised. And that's why we have also put in subparagraph B. That is, the Commission needs to consider and evaluate the general conditions of marine safety concerning passenger vessels in Hong Kong and their adequacy or otherwise. So I believe that the work will be comprehensive and we can cope with all the questions asked by Mr. Leung. Mr. Lai, for the investigation to be carried out by the police, when the commission is set up, the work will be carried out in parallel. That is, the police investigation and the Commission of Inquiry's work. Next, Mr. Poon. Well, we are all saddened by the collision and the sinking of the vessel. For the rescue operation of the departments, we all give recognition to the good work done. Now, our biggest concern now is to prevent the recurrence of something similar. As we all know, for the safety of the navigation channels as well as the safety at sea during fireworks display, we can't afford to lose the lives of the citizens of Hong Kong. Well, we have a fast ferry colliding with a slow-moving launch. The cruise terminal will soon be completed as far as the construction is concerned. So we need to regulate the traffic at sea. The review should take place as soon as possible. The Director of Marine promised to review the arrangements. We need to look at the working hours of the crewmen as well. Well, as some members have said, we have to wait for a long time before we see a report from the Commission. But what about the Marine Department's investigation? Do you have a timetable? And then fireworks display. I think in the past there used to be 500 at its peak. This year, 200. Yes, they have to put in an application, but then due to the lack of manpower, it is difficult to inspect and patrol all of them. So I want to know whether you would cap the maximum number of vessels that can gather in the Victoria Harbour, and what about the manpower needed? Questions for the MD. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as fireworks display is concerned, the record is the occasion when there were 500 vessels. For this year, it was about 150 vessels. As far as management is concerned, it is a multi-pronged approach. In the past, we produced guidelines and directives, but they tend to be reviewed. Therefore, we want to know whether we need to introduce legislation to do that. and perhaps some administrative measures prior to legislative work. We'll take the initiative to do this. Every time before fireworks display is hosted, we do talk to the stakeholders. We do have seminars to inform the stakeholders about the need to observe safety at sea. We intend to enhance our work in this regard, and therefore recently we have set up a working group together with the stakeholders, and we had a meeting, and then for the October meeting of the Local Vessels Advisory Committee, we'll go into the details. That is, we want to enhance marine safety, and for vessels to comply with the safety requirements concerning life jackets and fire. We are concerned about that, and we want to know whether there should be more training for the crewmen in the case of an emergency. Mr. Yik and then Dr. Chen. On behalf of the Liberal Party, I would like to express our deepest mourning for the deceased and extend our heartiest condolences and sympathy to the victims and their families. On this occasion, we saw that the government and all the departments had done their utmost, and we should give them our recognition. The Commission of Inquiry will be set up, and the government is in the process of identifying the best candidate. And I hope that internally the government can carry out various investigations into the matter. Last week, I met with the ferry operators. We reviewed the internal arrangements, and we tried to see whether the drills were adequate. The Director of Marine said that they had a working group, and I also hope that we should act quickly so as to ensure passenger safety. So we welcome cooperation with the government. Some colleagues mentioned the restrictions imposed during fireworks display. And after the completion of the display, it seems that vessels were competing with each other to send the passengers back to land. I can tell from personal experience that this could be quite risky. So there should be communication to improve this. And then, for vessels going from Sai Kung to Long Kea, we have pleasure boats, quite a lot of them, during weekends. When we have high-speed yachts, they will produce water currents which would jeopardize the safety of smaller vessels, and I hope that the Marine Department would also pay attention to this phenomenon. MT. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For Sai Kung, I think during the summer months, I think the traffic is quite busy, in particular the involvement of pleasure boats. For some vessels, sometimes the speed is such that they will produce waves, and then this may give rise to a problem. In Hong Kong, we impose speed limits in various zones, and we consult the stakeholders, and we'll try to increase the number of speed limit zones so as to reduce the number of problems. From time to time, we receive complaints, we act on them immediately, and we talk to the district councils, we talk to the yacht clubs to see how problems can be resolved. We'll continue with our work in this direction. Dr. Chen and then Dr. Lam. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I would like to express our deepest sympathy for those who were involved, and for those who took part in the frontline operations. I would like to express my gratitude towards them. They have been very dedicated towards their work in carrying out the rescue. Mr. Chairman, the Director of Marine gave answers to questions asked by members, and I would like to follow them up. Now, the Director of Marine is saying that it will take time to follow up on the issues, to have meetings with stakeholders to find out what has to be done. The impression I get is that he's not firm enough. We are talking about the tragedy, claiming 39 lives, making many injured on the 1st of October. It has caused a lot of concern in the community. For the fireworks display on the 1st of October, yes, indeed, guidelines have been issued. Now, I understand that all the vessels must meet with the safety requirements. I don't know why you still need time to re-examine them. For paragraphs 5 to 9, I think it is quite clear that all vessels must carry out the safety measures. Say, for example, telling the passengers where the life-saving appliances are and the proper way to don a life jacket. And then all children at all times are required to don a life jacket. And then the passenger list concerning the names of passengers and crew on board has to be kept by the master for emergency purposes. And then they must make sure that the carrying capacity specified in the operating license of the vessel is adhered to. Now, it is said that there wasn't any exceedance of capacity, there wasn't any speeding. Maybe very well you would say that the guidelines are not legally binding. But if you know that there is already a problem, how come that at this moment we have yet to hear from the administration that you have a clear answer? You talked about talking to the stakeholders, considering whether something has to be done. If the guidelines are not legally binding, then please tell us something firmer so as to prevent something similar happening again. And then I hope that the STH, Professor Chen, can give a concrete answer to the following question. For the October 1st fireworks display, for the guidelines as well as public education, do you think that it was inadequate? STH, Mr. Chairman. For the guidelines for the National Day fireworks display, indeed, it was not legally binding. But then for many years, every time when we had a major event, the Marine Department would issue a notice to inform ship owners, masters, coxswains, operators of things to note. I agree that we need to step up the publicity. When we answered members' questions, we talked about whether the guidelines should be sort of enhanced. And for life-saving appliances, preparations to be taken out by passengers, reminders to be given by the operators, whether the requirements have to carry legal effects, our review would cover them. Dr. Lam Tai-fai, well, in this tragedy, 39 lives have been claimed, and the victims and their family members have been thrown into the abyss of great suffering. Not only are they in suffering and great hardship, it is heartbreaking for all of us, and I hope that they will come out from the suffering, and I hope that they can have hope again. Mr. Chairman, for the police, the Fire Services Department, Government Flying Services, St. John's Ambulance, the Auxiliary Medical Services and other support staff, like the SWD staff, Hospital Authority staff, HAD staff, who joined in the operation, I think all of them have shown their professionalism. They have been most efficient. They are fully dedicated to their work, and they have displayed all sorts of bravery. And I think they should be given recognition by the community of Hong Kong. CS4A, I think I would like to raise my big thumb to record my gratitude towards them. I think many citizens of Hong Kong would agree with me that they have shown bravery in this operation. There will be an investigation prosecution, compensation. The government must do a proper job. If someone has to be taken to court, do so. And if someone needs to be compensated for, please give the compensation to them. We want to unearth the truth, and we must learn a painful lesson from this. It is indeed going to be a painful lesson. Yes, we are lucky, we are proud that we have a group of high-quality civil servants and rescuers and support team. But still, we need to inform the public. We need to educate the public so that they have a stronger sense of crisis, so that they can know what to do and in an emergency and tie in with your rescue work. Hong Kong is a blessed land, quite unlike the Philippines and Japan. But then from time to time, we encountered a serious accident. But what should we do? Do we only act when there is an emergency, or should we not be more prepared? I think we need to have more public education so the students, the elderly, and other walks of life can know how to cope with an emergency. We should also allow them to have a sense of crisis. We do have fires breaking out in the subdivided flats, so we need to make sure the citizens of Hong Kong know how to react and cope with emergencies, and then we can reduce the fatalities and the casualties. You can never tell when an accident may happen. Mr. Chairman, for this tragedy, I hope there won't be any efforts to politicize it. For the mainland government, for the liaison office, they have been showing concern and sympathy towards Hong Kong. I think it's only natural and legitimate. When someone is in suffering, in need of help, all other parties will try to help. I think this should be regarded as concern and caring. Don't make it politicized. It won't do us any good.
Just a moment ago, there were some colleagues who suggested that the firework display should have been suspended. Now, imagine this: if it was suspended, would it cause even more chaos at sea or on land, or more congestion? This is something for discussion, for evaluation. I don't think we should jump to any conclusion and say that suspension of the firework display was a sensible decision. Secretary or CS, how can you enhance the awareness of the members of the public, and so that we can minimize the casualties should this happen again? CS. Right, on behalf of all of my colleagues who were involved in the operation, I'm grateful to Mr. Lam for his comments. All our colleagues do us proud. There was a fire services officer who was injured in the rescue operation. Together with Mr. Lai, we visited him, and he told us that he felt sorry that he couldn't have saved more people. We went to the mortuary together with Mr. Matthew Zhang. I'm sure that members would understand how bad they felt. We would try our best to prevent so many tragedies from happening. Mr. Lam reminded us that we should heighten our awareness. Certainly this will be done. CS, I know you are pushed for time. Can you take one more question? Mr. KK Fong, Chairman, on behalf of the ADPL, I would like to express our condolences to the deceased, and I hope that the injured will recover soon enough. That this is a critical time for investigation. I'm no expert in this regard. It's hard for me to offer any specific comments, but there is one thing that we can learn from this. I don't think I can agree with Mr. Lam in saying that we're politicizing the whole thing. Now, in England, they deal with tragedies through political perspectives, and they try to bring glory to the officials. when they're dealing with the tragedies. We don't want these practice to be brought into Hong Kong. We're grateful to the fire services, the AMS, the St. John's ambulances. They dealt with the issues very efficiently. They didn't need any direction. They don't need any directives. They are very tactical, and they were able to coordinate and cooperate with one another in the rescue operation. They are so highly professional. They're dedicated to their work. This tragedy says it all about their professionalism. Now let me read you this new item of news from RTHK. The CNS reported that in this tragedy, the salvage boat from mainland China rescued 95 people, and subsequently the wordings were deleted. C.Y. Leung, the CE, said that these vessels were on standby and were not involved in the rescue operation. That the CNS revised the report but still pointed out that 4 vessels arrived on the scene and were involved in the rescue, and the senior leaders were in Hong Kong to direct the rescue operation. Now, we did send people to help with the rescue operation in the mainland, but the central command must be the central government. Is this report truthful or not? If this really happens, I mean, has the chief executive, the frontline staff, the departments and bureaus and so on, have they approached these people for help, or have they come in and became involved in the operation without any communication? And we have this automatic tactical system in Hong Kong. I mean, are we allowing politics to be involved? CS. I must reiterate that in this entire rescue operation, as usual, it is the Hong Kong SL government that is commanding the whole operation. The mobilization of staff, the support work, as usual, we adopt the same practice. Mr. Fong. Hong Kong is an affluent society. We are well developed. We have a well-developed, well-established bureaucracy and system. You remember when we had the nuclear leakage problem, or with regard to Dayao Bay, we had this system in place. We don't really want anybody, including the chief executive, giving the directive as to how the operation should be undertaken. This system has been in place, has been serving us well. I think this is of utmost importance. The central government or the provincial government, if they come to Hong Kong to help, I think the command should rest with the local government. Mr. Lai Chung Kwok, if I may add, Chairman, as Mr. Fong rightly pointed out, the departments received the emergency rescue signal. Our officers turned up at the scene straight away, and that's why we had the police launch arriving first, and then the fire boat. We mobilized the officers collaboratively. Mr. Fong referred to what he quoted. The information was retracted by the relevant party. I have here with us a press release from the mainland authorities. Let me read you this. 4 salvage boats arrived in Hong Kong at 4 a.m. Directing ships, vessels. They were on standby, so the entire operation was actually commanded by the Hong Kong authorities. If members wish to follow up on this issue, you might wish to do so at the panel. Economic Services panel covers marine, land, and air issues in its terms of reference. My thanks to the government officials for coming. There are 18 members who have put questions. There are 10 members who failed to put any questions. Thank you all very much for coming. Meeting adjourned. We start the regular House Committee.